everyone. The program is the fourth of 5 programs that we will hold on the topic of personal finances. And tonight our program is going to be dedicated to the topic of charitable giving. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and I will turn it over to Kent Kramer of Foster Group. Kent is the Chief Investment Officer and a lead advisor with Foster Group, and advanced expertise in financial planning strategies for physicians. And so, a second, I'm going to turn it over to Kent. Just will say that we're going to keep phone lines open so if folks have questions. But if we start to pick up a bunch of background noise, we'll go ahead and mute those out. But then we'll stop it a couple times at Kent's discretion, and we'll open it up to questions to the group. And so, Kent, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Mark. Glad to be here. It's kind of nice to be inside. I know up in South Dakota it's been cold, and it's cold here in Iowa too. So it's nice to sit here and be able to talk to you this way tonight. As Mark mentioned, tonight's subject is on charitable giving, which is really an interesting and enjoyable subject for us, I think, to have a conversation about, because while it does have some technical aspects, the things that drive our thinking about charitable giving are very personal in nature. They center around our values, things that are important to us. So this may be a little bit of a different conversation, at least in some aspects than we've had in the other ones. So we'll talk about some technical aspects to enhance our charitable giving and to hopefully make it as effective as possible. Just a quick review, as Mark mentioned, this is our fourth presentation here in a series, and other presentations that we've made so far have had to do with what we call key concerns around wealth or money. First, the idea of wealth preservation has to do with how we manage our investments so that they only grow, but as they grow, we protect them from loss along the way. Wealth protection to do with different kinds of insurance and strategies for protecting our wealth from catastrophe or legal taking or things like that. Investment in terms of wealth has to do with tax planning and strategy, transfers, estate planning. How do we transfer assets to our heirs, people that we care about, possibly the transfer of a business. And this wealth transfer relates really well to our subject tonight, which is charitable giving, our fifth key concern, if you will. And instead of transferring to heirs, transferring a business to other people, charitable giving is a type of a transfer where we're transferring assets. We'll talk about financial assets as well as other kinds of assets, time, interest, to causes and organizations that we may care about or have a particular tie to it, wanting them to succeed. Words that's been, or phrases that's been coined lately is the idea of social capital. And with charitable giving, we can help create social capital that leads to really what some have called human flourishing, allows people to kind of achieve their maximum. The capacity is increased for our communities to do the things that benefit the whole. Reading a book recently called Worry Less About Money by a philosopher named John Armstrong, and he said this, and I think it has to do with our topic tonight. He writes, most people realize they really need to do things for other people. Deep fear that one's life will be lived in vain without making a contribution or a benign difference to the lives of others. And then he says, flourishing means getting on with the things that are important for you to do, using your capacities, actively trying to realize what you care about and get into life. And the idea of actively trying to realize what you care about, what we care about, bringing into life, relates directly to our charitable giving. In recent years, in 2010, Americans gave about $212 billion to charitable causes. It's estimated that in 2013 that number grew to over $300 billion. Americans are fairly generous. There's a number of indexes. There's one of the World Giving Index that has ranked the United States at or near the top in terms of charitable giving over the 5 years, and that number has continued to increase. So it's a lot of us are interested in charitable giving, and as we think about charitable giving, the idea that I want to get for tonight is that there's a couple of ways to think about it, and that's the way I'm going to structure our presentation. And the one that I want to talk about briefly is why we want to give charitably. And it's real important in a subject like this, just like it is in estate planning, that before we start thinking about tools or techniques, that we're clear on why we want to give, what we want to accomplish with our giving. The subject is who and where, and that has to do with identifying your personal giving goals and purposes. We want to talk about goals first, tools and techniques second. And then first two areas are clear in our mind, we can talk about how. And that's methods for accomplishing your giving goals. The tax structure in the United States really does provide some advantages to people who want to give charitably. It provides some incentives for that. And look at what those incentives are and how we can maximize them as we try to give the things that we care most about. Reasons for charitable giving. Why? Why do we want to give, and where does this come from? I like the definition of the word philanthropy. This is a kind of an etymology of the word from the Greek, combining the words philos and anthropos, the idea of love of humanity. It really comes out of this sense that we want to do well for others as well as doing well for ourselves. We have a state of well-educated habits stemming from the love of humanity, a state of being productive, of benefit to humans, a state of grace, mindfulness together with good works. It's a definition. I think it's one that we'd like to share with us as we consider how we live our lives. And then from the Latin, this idea of caritas, preciousness, dearness, high price, kind of got a religious tradition where the idea of we give charitably when we give, generously when we give in a way that actually alters the way that we might otherwise live. We're giving almost in a sacrificial manner. And then think about pure public and foreign kinds of charitable giving. This definition, pure charity, is really entirely gratuitous. In other words, we receive nothing in return. Publicity is a kind of charitable giving that benefits the whole rather than the individual. So we're looking at benefiting the whole community that we live in, or the larger community. And then foreign charity is beneficiary lives in a country different from where funds or services are being sent from, and those definitions come out of Black's Law Dictionary. These have been around for a while and developed quite a set of tools and around our charitable giving. Well, let's more personally hear about why you may want to be more thoughtful about how you give charitably, and saying that you're now, if you're listening tonight, and maybe you're thinking about how can you be more thoughtful or intentional about that. So the first thing is important in talking about charitable giving with individuals is it really is a personal decision, and the way that you give and the places that you give to are personalized. Some of the things to think about here, one is where your heart and mind are. This grows with your values, your vision for the future, apparent needs that you've experienced. A lot of times when people travel, particularly travel internationally, they see needs that they haven't seen before personally, and heart goes out to those people in those situations. I was recently at an event in Ames, Iowa, where Simon Estes, very famous opera singer, was in a fundraising concert because he had visited parts of Africa, saw what good could be done just by providing insecticide-treated mosquito nets. He was working with the United Nations. There's a whole area there where the United Nations trying to provide mosquito nets to areas in Africa where by just providing mosquito nets that people can sleep under, the threat of malaria can be reduced dramatically. And he was so moved by being in that environment that he wanted to give his time and attention to raising money for those nets. Might be building social capital for the benefit of the community and the future generations where you live. And I think about this one sometimes in the idea of enlightened self-interest. We all benefit from local schools that succeed. We benefit from hospitals that are state-of-the-art and are able to treat disease and cancer and things that, we'd like to think, hey, this is good for the community at large. It may actually be good for myself someday or my family or other people that I care about. We've been from local arts communities, so we give to the arts because we enjoy what they provide to our community experience, not only for ourselves again, but for the community as a whole. So there's a certain enlightened self-interest there in building social capital. Cause of personal repayment, something where you personally have benefited from something in the past. And for those of you who are fishing on the call tonight, I've heard lots of stories from people who have benefited from going to particular hospitals or specialists who provide a degree of care for a disease or a condition. They're greatly helped by the services that you provide, and they want to give so that research in that area can continue, then others can benefit in the way that they have. I'd be around education. So that I'm very familiar with is there's a gentleman named David Booth. David Booth founded Dimensional Fund Advisors, which is a mutual fund company that we work with at Foster Group. Booth attended graduate school at the University of Chicago, and he was a research associate for Eugene Fromm. At Booth, or at the Chicago Business School, he was exposed to the ideas of financial markets and modern financial theory that allowed him to form Dimensional Fund Advisors, which has become the 8th largest mutual fund company in the world. Years ago, Booth gave a gift to the University of Chicago, $300 million, enough for them to name the Graduate School of Business after him. But in his speech, talking about why he was making this gift, Booth said, well, if I hadn't been here, I wouldn't have learned these things, and I think of this not so much as a gift, but as a dividend, a return on the investment. And it's just a neat way to posture his generosity back to the school. Personalized reason for giving may have to do with how much is enough for your heirs. There's a lot of research done about, what large inheritances for children or for people that we care about, and some truth to the idea that sometimes people can inherit too much. And so you and your spouse maybe think about, well, how much is enough for our children versus how much is enough doesn't include everything that you own. So let's say, just for example, that you think that $500,000 per child is enough. Even after giving $500,000 to each child in your estate, there's still $1 million left. So what's going to happen to that $1 million? And that's a charitable question. Where is that going to go beside your heirs? And the last bullet here is directing social capital personally versus through governmental direction. And put it this way, this idea of redirecting otherwise taxable dollars. Today, in estate planning, the exclusion from estate tax for individuals and couples has gotten to be a fairly large number. So an individual can now pass to their heirs about $5.3 million without estate tax. A couple can pass as much as $10.6 million heirs without estate taxes. But in case of very large estates, or where maybe your assets are held in an individual retirement account, is that if those assets above the estate tax exclusion number or a form of IRA assets, as they pay out to heirs, there's going to be taxes due on those assets. And so some people say, well, I have to direct where those assets are going to go to different social causes I choose, as opposed to having those assets go and be taxed, where the government's going to direct where my assets might go to benefit others. It's so much saying taxes are always bad. It's just a way of saying, well, if I have a choice to make the direction myself, I will, rather than having someone else make it for me. This idea there, everybody's making their personal decisions about where to give. The next step is, once you identify the why and the where, you may want to develop something called a giving policy statement. We talked in earlier presentations, and if someone works with Foster Group, we'll talk a lot about something called investment policy statement, which is a document that just says, hey, this is how I want my portfolio structured. This is how my assets divided into different kinds of asset classes, where it might be large company stocks, small company stocks, international, or bonds, and cash. Allocation strategy. Same way, we think that people who really think intentionally about charitable giving may want to consider an allocation strategy for their charitable giving and their charitable purposes. So this giving policy statement breaks out how you're going to divide your giving dollars. And you might break it out by types of causes or organizations. So one big category might be the idea of relieving suffering. I want a certain amount of my charitable giving to go towards relieving suffering. That's in the medical area, preventative treatment. It's in providing food and water to areas of the world that don't have that. Shelter, disaster relief. Those are all kinds of giving that relieve the suffering of individuals here and abroad. A large category of giving could be called investment. Think about education, entrepreneurial investments. There's a whole category of charitable effort now called micro-lending or direct investment in small businesses and in the world where entrepreneurism needs to increase so that they have more employment and economic development. Or areas, the arts and politics. These have, again, I think they talk about this idea of social capital, but they're building social capital in the communities that we live in. They help our communities advance. Religious causes are very popular for a lot of people in terms of charitable planning, everything from your local place of worship and outreach to domestic and foreign mission outreach. And maybe in the faith and religious area, there's also things to think about in terms of overlapping. So there would be faith-based medical missions or faith-based educational outreaches where you're not only doing relieving of suffering or advancement kind of activities, but you're doing it from a faith organization or a faith-based foundation. That can be very rewarding for people. The last, maybe think about dividing or thinking about allocating your giving in terms of geography. How many giving dollars do you want to go to the local community where you live and your children perhaps live? How much do you want to focus nationally here in the United States? How do you want to give that goes outside the borders of the United States? And people have different reasons as to why they want to focus on these three kinds of geographic areas as they think their personal charitable goals and purposes. What we do for individuals who are getting more intentional about their charitable giving is to break it down into a pie chart that looks like this so they can see where my dollars go. So if I have a certain amount of money that I want to set aside each year or in a future giving plan for charitable giving, kind of slice that up in a way that I'm going to feel good about it, my intention giving strategy. So perhaps a local church that gets 30%, or an educational institution, or a series of institutions receiving 20%, a medical allocation, a political allocation, disaster relief of some kind, civic organizations. The thing that I would encourage you as you think about charitable giving, we tend to just default to think about charitable giving in terms of giving to organizations or places where we get tax benefits. In other words, our gift is tax deductible. A real charitable gift does not have to be tax deductible to serve your giving purposes. It very well may not be. I work with all the time who want to benefit individuals directly, and oftentimes to really help those individuals directly, they do their giving in a way that's not tax deductible. But that personal connection is very meaningful to them. They'll see it as a charitable cause because these folks are really in desperate need in some cases, or maybe they need help going to school, so they provide scholarship funds or something like that. But it's directly to individuals. It's not tax deductible, but it really expresses their charitable giving intent. This way to break it up, I would recommend thinking about it in both ways, both in terms of what kinds of organizations that you want to give to and benefit, as where those organizations are located. Again, some folks, knowing that some of their dollars are going outside of the United States is important to them. For others, they want to know that they're doing significant benefit for the local community that they live in. There's all kinds of reasons, rationale for why that's important to folks. The thing to remember here is when we think about charitable giving, it's really driven by things that are important to us personally. So your GS, your giving policy statement, may look dramatically different from sources. Neither one is right or wrong. They just represent your personal priorities, the things that are meaningful to you. It's very important. Maybe up there for a minute, Mark, and this might be a good place just to take a break to see if anybody has a question.
Okay, give me just a second. I did go ahead and mute the phones because we were picking up some background noise. So I'm going
okay.
And I'll unmute all the phones. And again, I apologize here. I'm going to do that right now, and then we'll see if we have any questions. So the phone lines are open.
What we say about these, the idea of a giving policy statement before we move on to our next area here. And people who are generous, once you start giving, and people or organizations are aware of your generosity, you can be asked to give to lots of things. I'm sure you have experienced that either through mail, phone calls, personal contacts. One of the great things about a giving policy statement is if you measure along the way where you want to be most intentional about your giving, it helps you to say yes to the thing you want to say yes to, but it also can help you to say no to things that while they may be perfectly good things, worthwhile things, they're really not a part of what it is that you personally are trying to accomplish. And when we help people to think about their giving that way, there's a feeling of guilt sometimes about saying no to charitable requests because they know they're doing what they intend to do charitably. It's just that this particular request that they're having to say no to doesn't fit their personal priorities. And they're very freeing and working through that. Okay, well, if there are no questions on that one, we'll go ahead, Mark.
No, I was going to check to see if there were any questions at this time. Hearing none, why don't you go ahead and proceed?
All right, we'll move right along here. So get that an idea straight in our mind as to why we want to give, what kind of organizations we want to give to in broad categories. Maybe the next section is, or the next thing we think about is, well, particularly, how do I choose organizations or places where these dollars are actually going to end up? So the question, which organizations? And different ways to go about selection there. Obviously, one of the big ones is personal involvement. Many of us are volunteering in organizations. We may be on boards. We have family members who are involved in different organizations or causes. And those personal involvements allow us kind of a peek behind the curtain and see the good work that's being done. And that'd be one way that we go about selecting which organizations to be involved with. Sure. And then just through references. And here, peers or advisors, we all have friends and acquaintances who are doing things that we're interested in. So we may seek the advice of others. Say, hey, I'm interested in doing something in the medical community. Could you show me or help me find a place where maybe find to give where it would have a particular benefit? Say someone they've got a family member who's suffering some eye issues, and they want to give to research around eye health. There's some help that can be by talking to an ophthalmologist or other people who are involved in that area to help direct their give to a place where they're really doing the best research and seeing some good results happen. To steer you to, and I know that you have one of these available to you there in the Sioux Falls area and in South Dakota, are something community foundations. Community foundations are usually established as a charitable foundation within a local area, and what community foundation becomes is a clearinghouse for different kinds of charitable activities that are going on in the greater community. So they're aware of here's some work being done for low-income housing in this part of our community, or an area where mentoring is happening for children at risk, an area where the arts are really being supported. And they know which agencies are engaged in those things, and they know how to connect people with those organizations. In some cases, even community foundations establish particular giving funds so that you can give to the community foundation, and they actually do the vetting of charity. So let's say that you say, I really want to give to local arts, but I'm not sure which ones I want to benefit directly. Community foundation may very well have a fund for local arts organizations. They're going to be able to vet those organizations and find out which ones are doing the best work and help you get to some place where they're going to have the greatest effect. Communications is also put into place, so they may have something called a donor advised fund that you could access, or local endowments. I'm going to talk about those tools here in a little bit, but we've seen great success in working with community foundations, and it's an organization that also has a lot of continuing education for your own charitable giving and how to go about it. So I would refer you to the community foundation there as a place to go for additional information and education. There's organizations that have grown up recently that are measuring the impact and effectiveness of the gifts, of the money that are going through them. And people have started to ask things about return on investment. We used to think of return on investment only related to business, but more people are looking for, hey, what's the return on the charitable investment here? When I put dollars to work in your organization, what is the result? And are there measures of that result that I can see? Again, if you look at these rating organizations, Good Start, Charity Navigator, Watch, some of these organizations, they actually look at charity by charity and then give measurable statistics on like much of the money, how much of each dollar goes to the actual program work of the charity. And there is some of the efficient charities around the world, they may have as much as 90% of each dollar or more into the actual program that they're administering. Less efficient charities spend a larger percentage of their money on fundraising itself or on administration. So as a percentage of your dollars gifted, a lower percentage of it is actually getting to the work that you intended it and is going to supporting the organization that's trying to raise the money. So as you know, the organizations that you want to be involved with, these places, GuideStar and Charity Navigator in particular, they're available on the web. You can go to websites and type in the charity that you're interested in, and they can give you all kinds of effectiveness and efficiency measures for local for that charitable organization. So when we think about gifting, kind of the next thing is once we identify the places, kind of why questions and the where and the who, then we're asking, well, what am I going to gift and when am I going to gift it? Talk a little bit about the when of giving first when we think about this as a consideration. Current future, lump sum or endowment. It has to do with the timeliness question. And in timeliness here, one of the ways to think about it is effectiveness. You time your transfer of assets, whatever it might be, to minimize its use by you, your heirs, and the cause. These things continue to be in conflict. They don't need to be, but things along the way that you're going to want to think about is, do I want to still use this asset during my lifetime or for some period of years before I transfer it to a charity? So you may have a business interest, an interest in a home, even in an investment account or something like that that's providing income to you today. And for a while, you need to maximize that asset's use for yourself, so it's going to be given to a charity more in the future. The effectiveness thing is you want to know when the asset is going to be most effective for the people that you care about the most or the organization. The other timeliness that I would say is accountability. And that's a little phrase, I've seen it in a couple of different books. Do you give in while you're living so you're knowing where it's going? The idea is one of accountability. If you are putting charitable bequests into your will or into your estate plan, that's fantastic. But gifts are going to be given when you're gone. And if you're writing that bequest today, that gift maybe isn't actually made to the charity for 20 or 25 years, you don't know for sure whether that organization is going to be under the same leadership, the same management, even the same priorities that it does today. Whereas if you look at the organization today and you know what the cause they're working on, you can see the results, you know the people who are in charge, there's a degree of accountability and confidence that you can give those dollars today because you know where those dollars are going and what they're doing. Part of that has to do with having a really good financial plan, because people feel confident giving significant charitable gifts today. They need to kind of know, hey, what do I need personally to make sure that I have enough for my family to be independent for the rest of our lives. And this is somewhat excess, where I know we can give this away and not threaten our financial well-being. that question, it becomes a lot easier again to do that again while you're living, because you can give freely knowing that this is not threatening your financial independence, that you can also give very intentionally because you can see the need as it exists today and you can see your dollars going to meet that immediate need or circumstance. Times again, in terms of current gifts, just definition issues here. In a current gift, the beneficiary receives immediate access to the funds. Some of those funds, perhaps all of them, when we make a gift. Different of current gifts, the one we're most familiar with is the direct gift, the transfer cash or stock asset or something fully 100% to that charity, so they have access to that gift 100% and it's immediate. Their kind of current gift that people are less familiar with is something called a split interest gift. Where the gift actually benefits both parties, both the donor and the beneficiary. And that's through something called a lead trust or a gift annuity. Again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But lead trusts and gift annuities, what they do is they provide some access to funds of the charity immediately while retaining an interest to a portion of those funds, either through income or a future refund of an interest to the actual donor. So that interest gift can have a benefit to the charity while retaining some of the benefits of the assets for the donor themselves. Future that we're familiar with here, the beneficiary receives the funds at a future date or a future event happens. This is a testamentary gift through a will or a trust bequest that says when I or myself and my spouse have both passed, we want these amount of dollars or this percentage of our estate or this percent of our IRA account to give this charity. That's a classic example of a testamentary gift through a will or trust bequest. Again, beneficiary designation does the same thing. Oftentimes people will look at their IRA assets and they realize some assets that they go to a non-spouse beneficiary. The non-spouse beneficiary is going to pay income tax on them as well as potentially estate tax. So in paying the tax on the whole amount, they'll cut off a portion of that IRA and say, I want 20% of my IRA or 401k to go to the charity. And that charity will receive those dollars and there will be no income tax due on the transfer from the IRA to charity, let's say, at the death of the IRA owner. It's a very efficient way to give. Life insurance is a similar type of a thing where you have a beneficiary designation that indicates your name to charity directly, so upon the death, those proceeds go directly to the charity. And then this is another split interest gift called remainder trust. In this case, a charitable gift is made to a trust, and during the lifetime of the donor receives some kind of an income stream during the lifetime or some period of years. At the end of that lifetime or period of years, the remainder of the trust goes to charity. We'll talk a little bit more about that kind of split interest technical gift in a little bit as well, just so you have a little more background on how they work and why they might be something to consider for you in your charitable gift planning. Again, lump sum. This is where 100% of the intended gift amount is available at one time. So a direct gift, you're making a gift saying, you know what, I want 100% of this gift to be available to the charity immediately. Being a direct gift, someone gives a percent into an endowment account where instead of the charity having access to 100% of the dollar amount immediately, perhaps the charity only has access to 5% of that at a time. An endowment gift is often used at the university level to endow a teaching position, or sometimes it's used at a local arts organization to endow a chair, let's say the first chair violin or the first chair in some section of the orchestra. What happens there in an endowment is a person gives a course amount. Let's say they have $100,000 into endowment to support a particular scholarship. And that endowment does is every year it distributes some percentage to the charity to fill the wishes of the donor. So a $100,000 gift, a normal endowment of let's say 5 or 6%, could put $5,000 or $6,000 a year to the charity or university or orchestra, whatever might be identified there. And each year, for kind of the foreseeable future, would have a gift coming from that endowment, that corpus, to pay the donor's interest for a very long period of time. A great way to leverage a gift for the long-term health of an organization or cause that you care about. So the assets to gift. There's from the very simple to the more complex. Let's start with the simplest here. Cash is probably the easiest thing to gift and what people are most familiar with giving. It's the simplest, it's the most flexible. Thing is, you can, in charitable gifts, you can donate cash gifts up to 50% of your adjusted gross income. If all those gifts are going to tax-deductible organizations, again, you can deduct that from your taxes up to 50% of your adjusted gross income. That's true for our cash. Charities, we see this one as an area where a surprising number of people just are not aware of how easy it is for them to give appreciated securities and why it's so valuable to consider appreciated securities. That can be stocks, mutual funds, bonds, publicly traded securities of all kinds. The thing about appreciated securities is the gifting of them can be simplified through using something called donor advised fund, which I'll talk about in a minute. The gift of appreciated securities is very tax efficient. It allows the investor to avoid capital gains taxes on your long-term assets. So if you own a stock for a number of years, and you bought for 100, and now it's worth 1,000, if you were to sell that stock for 1,000, you would owe tax on the $900 of gain. But by gifting that asset, as we'll see in a minute, you can avoid the capital gains tax on that $900 completely. You get the full benefit of the $1,000 gift and get to deduct the full $1,000 for income tax purposes. Often, appreciated securities, if you've been gifting cash, sometimes it's really efficient to get appreciated security. And if you still want to hold that mutual fund or that stock, we did earlier with Clarence, it was very interesting. He travels a lot and he eats at a lot of cheesecake factories. So he just interesting to own Cheesecake Factory stock. Well, he'd owned for a number of years, wanted to continue to own it, but had a lot of appreciation in the stock, and he was gifting cash to charities. And we said, no, really what you should be doing here is let's gift your Cheesecake Factory stock itself, because it's so tax efficient to do that. We're not going to have to capital gains on the gift. And if you've been gifting in cash, we just use that cash to repurchase the Cheesecake Factory that was gifted away. So kind of refreshing the portfolio, we raise the cost basis in the portfolio as a whole. He continues to hold Cheesecake Factory, which he wants to just because it's a personal interest, but the gets a great gift and gains taxes are avoided completely. Another thing just to note about appreciated securities, unlike cash, which you can deduct up 50% of your adjusted gross income, with appreciated securities, you can deduct up to 30% of your gross income in terms of the amount of appreciated securities that you gift. Now, you can combine cash giving and appreciated securities. So if you gift appreciated securities up to 30% of your AGI, you can more in cash. So that next 20%, if you gift it in cash, to take you up to 50% giving of your total AGI, the entire amount would be deductible. 30% associated with appreciated securities, 20% of it associated with cash, 50% AGI limit is maintained for the overall cash and securities giving. Here's an example. I just thought it's helpful sometimes to see this idea of giving and appreciated securities because it's such a positive thing to do. Let's say a person owns 500 shares of U.S. Bank and it's currently trading at $41 a share. They purchased in 2011 at $20 a share. That doesn't seem like that long ago, but actually this is a real life example. You could have purchased this bank for $20 a share in 2011, and today it's trading, it was just trading way north of $41 a share. And has a desire to make $20,000 of charitable gifts in the current year. Option one and this is one we would not recommend, for you to sell the 500 shares of U.S. Bank for $20,500. You would have capital gains taxes that you would owe on that sale. So you'd owe 15% capital gains tax on $1,500 of gain, or probably 20% under today's tax law. So let's just use 15%. So a little over $1,500 in taxes just associated with selling stock for a gain. And you have the remainder then of $18,925. That would generate a current year tax deduction for you of $18,925. That's a tax savings in the 35% bracket to use $6,624. Security is going to only get $18,925, and your taxes, both capital gains taxes, but you're all then getting a tax deduction for the gift of $18,925. Now, what would happen if we took that set of circumstances, but instead of selling the shares and gifting the proceeds after tax, if we just gifted the shares, use donor advised fund. So we're going to gift 500 shares of U.S. Bank to a donor advised fund. That tax-free transaction, and it has very little cost associated with it as well. Once those 500 shares are in the donor advised fund, which itself is a charitable entity from the IRS point of view, the net of the sale at $41 a share, $20,500. We just avoided capital gains tax on the sale of that U.S. bank. Then gift $20,000 to the charitable cause that you had in mind. And $500 can be gifted to another charity, and then be gifted at a later date. It does not need to be gifted in 2014. If you did this year, you can say, I want to give $20,000 in 2014 to this organization, but I don't know where I want this other $500 to go. The beauty of the donor advised fund is that $20,500 that goes into the donor advised fund, you can get as much of it or as little of it to some of the charities that you have in mind in the year that you make the transfer to the donor advised fund. So it gives a great deal of flexibility and timing. You get the full tax benefit, the deductibility of that $20,500 gift, and here that you transfer the shares to the donor advised fund. But the charities that you want to receive that gift, you can break that out over time, or you can give it all immediately if you so choose. The tax of this are a little more favorable. You get a clear tax deduction of the full $20,500. So the tax savings in the 35% bracket is $7,175, and that was the $1,623 previously, and pay any capital gains taxes in this example. So that was $1,575 in taxes that were not paid at all. So in this option 2, saves $2,126 and some change in taxes. It also results in the full $20,500 of U.S. Bank share value going to charity. We think when people think about this and kind of run this idea through their mind a few times, it really begins to take hold, and they see the value of gifting appreciated security whenever possible, as opposed to just using cash. A few more things about donor advised funds, because I use those in our example here. Donor funds, advantage of these is they're very easy to use and are really quite available to individual investors. Charles Schwab, Fidelity, major account brokerage houses generally all have what are called a donor advised fund facility. Schwab's case, for example, they have something called Schwab Fund for Charitable Giving. It's actually a separate organizational entity from the Schwab organization. It's set as a tax-exempt public charity. As a tax-exempt public charity, it can create this donor advised fund vehicle where people can basically open an account, their personal donor advised fund, and those created shares are transferred into their donor advised fund. They get the tax benefit from the transfer. So they're easy to use. They have very low cost relative to private foundations. So in the past, people have thought, I'd really like to set up a family foundation to take some assets and gift it into this private foundation. The thing about private foundations is they do have to prepare and file their own tax return. There are administrative costs associated with setting them up and maintaining them. They are a corporate entity, so their legal filing is necessary at the front end to set these things up. Usually require the assistance of an attorney and accounting firm to let it run. So there's an annual expense associated with a private foundation. We find it doesn't make a lot of sense unless someone really wants to have a large foundation, maybe $5 to $10 million before it's feasible. Advantage for donor-advised funds, they're very flexible regarding the contribution and distribution timing. So a year when you're going to have a particularly high income and you want larger gifts just to offset some of that income, even though you plan on having it get to the ultimate reason in that year, you can contribute money and appreciate securities into that donor-advised fund, get current tax deduction, and you can hold those funds in that donor-advised fund until some future date when you have identified the charities that you want to receive those dollars. The thing about a donor-advised fund, it allows you to give to multiple charities and precise dollar amounts. When we give appreciated securities directly to a charity, you're giving whole shares generally based on what the market does on the day of the gift. It's hard to get a precise dollar amount into what you want to give. So if you had targeted a $1,000 gift, it's hard to give appreciated securities and hit that $1,000 number right on the mark. A couple tax caveats around donor-advised funds. They can't just fulfill a technical pledge, and that's important from an IRS point of view. If you've signed a pledge card, you can't use a donor-advised fund to fulfill that pledge because the IRS would say in your pledge card you've entered into a contract and you can't contractually obligate this donor-advised fund to fulfill your pledge because there is a technical loss of control. When you get into a donor-advised fund, you now become the advisor on the funds, charitable organization. You don't have full legal control. I can tell you as a practical matter for all these larger donor-advised funds and community foundations, they are going to follow your direction in terms of where you want that money to go, or people stop using them as of their donor-advised funds and how they could be used in the community. Your gifts through a donor-advised fund ultimately have to go to qualified charities only. So I'm clear that some of your charitable giving, you may want to do it to people or entities that are not necessarily tax deductible. Political causes are like that. Individuals are like that. And so if you have some charitable giving goals around those kind of non-deductible entities, you won't want to use a donor fund to accomplish that kind of a gift. In terms of what assets to gift, certainly people give to real estate, gift to business interests, they personal property like automobiles, clothing, etc. For each of these kind of gifts, I'm going to suggest either consult the charity that you want to make the gifts to, that you work possibly with your community foundation or your accountant to specialize in charitable giving, because each one of these kinds of assets have rather technical rules associated with how they're gifted in terms of kind of deductibility there is associated with them. And I wouldn't want to make a misstep on using that kind of an asset because these are the kind of things that the IRS looks at a little more carefully and they trigger some scrutiny that you may not otherwise want around your charitable giving. Split gifts, just to close here, just briefly, these are interesting kinds of ways to gift. I'll start with charitable remainder trust. That's one that we found to be pretty popular. You have an appreciated asset. You get to a trust account which has the charity as the ultimate remainder beneficiary. And what that remainder beneficiary means is for some term of years, this trust is going to exist, and every year it's going to pay some amount to you or to someone that you designate as the beneficiary, the lifetime beneficiary of the trust. And so pay an income benefit, so let's say that it's dividends and interest, that's where it's going to pay, or you can do something called a unit trust amount, which means it's going to pay 5 or 6 or 7% of the principal value out each year to use an income. Where it is, this remainder trust, it pays an income to you for your lifetime or some term of years, And at the end of that term of years, the remainder in the trust goes to the charity. The thing about this kind of a split interest gift, the charitable remainder trust, for people who have highly appreciated assets, they have a single stock and they just have a huge cushion in it. And they don't want to hold that single stock anymore. But they know they need the benefit of owning that asset in some form. They kept that stock into this charitable remainder trust because it's a tax-free entity. Inside the portfolio, their income stream is more secure over time. And then again, at the end of that term of years, charity is going to get the remainder. Nice tax planning device. It generates an immediate deduction. So it's not a for dollar deduction because, again, you're going to receive some benefit during your lifetime. So you get to deduct the full amount that you put into this charitable trust. That's subject to a formula when it's created, but it does combine an income source, an immediate deduction, and creating a future gift to a charity, which can be very pleasing to some people who want to know that they've made that gift, that they can benefit from that asset during their lifetime. Cities and colleges will run something called the charitable gift annuity oftentimes, and that's a very similar kind of principle. Gifting a large amount of money to the university at some point in time in exchange for a stream of payments during your lifetime or some period of years. And at the end of the period of years of your lifetime, the university is going to have kind of the full access to the remainder that they've been managing to provide you that annuity during your lifetime. Type of split interest gift is something called the charitable lead trust. A lead trust is kind of the opposite of a remainder trust. In this case, when you put the asset in to the trust, during a certain term of years, the trust is going to be paying the charity an income for a term of years. So it's a way to income that would otherwise be taxable to you to put to a trust and have it go to the charity for some term of years. Again, it generates tax deductions to you. It keeps the income out of your current income statement or off your current tax return. But at the end of that period of years, you get back the asset or some percent of that asset that's been used to generate the income to the charity for that lead period. So lead trust is saying, hey, we're setting this thing up to provide income to the charity at some point in the future. That asset or some amount of that asset is going to come back to me or back to my family or to my estate, so it will be passed on to future generations. So a quick recap here on our presentation, and then we'll have a few minutes for questions. I'm happy to stay on as long as people would like. First, I would say it again is when you're thinking about charitable giving, it's always important to get your personal goals in mind first, tool techniques second. I think charitable giving is a very personal decision on people's part, so you want to make sure that you have a personal connection with those organizations that you want to benefit. The giving policy statement, the GPS, again, it can be to say yes to the right things. It can also help you say no to the wrong things. And I kind of urge you along the way to just check in on, hey, just how am I doing with being intentional with my giving? Am I really doing what I intended to do, or am I straying in some aspect? You want to find which assets you want to use to accomplish the gifts. You want to really think about the timeliness of your gift and your personal involvement with the organizations that you're giving to. So consider timing factors carefully. I encourage those of you who are engaged in charitable giving to investigate a personal donor advised fund. We see those as very effective, very efficient tools to aid you in your priorities. And then, again, when you can gift during your lifetime or connect with those charities during your lifetime, you can enjoy making an impact. And charitable giving is great for the charity and the organizations they benefit. Working with lots and lots of people, we just see all the time how much enjoyment people get out of giving and seeing their gifts have an impact on the causes and people that they care the most about. So I really thank you for your time this evening, and Mark, have entertained any questions that those people on the call may have.
Okay, through Kent, and I did open the phone line, so all phone lines are off mute. And if you have a question, here's your opportunity to go ahead and ask Kent your question.
have any questions, but I just want to say thank you. That was excellent and really gives a good framework, and I appreciate this very much.
I'm glad you said so. I appreciate that. It's a subject to talk about. I really think it is.
Mark, and I just want to throw out there because, sometimes, when talking about personal finances, I mean, the key word there is personal. And so if people don't always feel comfortable maybe presenting a question out into a group, and we have a group on a phone call.
Yeah.
If somebody does have a question tonight, are you available to answer folks' questions? And if so, how can they contact you or one of your coworkers?
Yeah, great. I'd love to do that. The simplest way to contact me is really an email. Email address is Kent K, K-E-N-T-K, at fostergrp.com, fostergrp.com. If you even just go to our website, the Foster Group website, which is fostergrp.com, you find my email address, and our phone number is on that website as well. We have to, entertain questions. Again, this is a subject that we enjoy helping people with. We think it's something that makes an impact in our communities and our world. So anything we can do to help facilitate it, we will.
Just throw out too, this is Mark, that if folks do have questions and aren't able to get Kent's email address written down, they're more than welcome to send them through the office here, and we could forward them to Kent and his coworkers too.
Great. Yes.
Can you just go back to the beginning of your presentation about the list of organizations that rate charities?
You can do that. Right there. Mm-hmm.
And more than the others, or?
Two, Five-Star and Charity Navigator are the biggest. And so, the likelihood that you're going to find, particularly national charities, they're all going to be on there. There's reasons to recommend either one of them. I like them both. They just provide different sets of information. The Wise Giving Alliance by the Better Business Bureau is also good. The National Center for Charitable Statistics is really it's interesting, but it's not as helpful from an efficiency or effectiveness standpoint. It just has more to do with the charity and locations. It's really a statistical sampling of what the charities are doing. But those two, and the Wise Giving Alliance too, it's hard to go wrong looking at those.
This is Mark. One question on this subject is, I know that we talked about this at one point. Sometimes these organizations that rate charities don't always cover the smaller ones. Somebody has a question on a smaller local charity. What would you recommend for them to be able to find out a little bit more about that charity and their operation?
It's a super question, and there's really, I think, probably two great ways to do it. One is, the most direct, is you call them up and you ask for a financial statement. And what you're looking for is you want to see what their total donations, what their total income looks like, and have them say how much of that is going out for direct programs for the people they're benefiting. And also, I would really steer you toward the Community Foundation. The Greater Des Moines Community Foundation in our area, we work with them frequently. They just have a wealth of information, both quantitative, the numbers, but also qualitative in terms of the leaders and people involved with the board, that kind of stuff. That can be real helpful, especially when you're on the board, because there may be some people on the board who you recognize and respect, and just their involvement with that area can give you a degree of confidence that they're doing a good job.
Any other questions for Kent this evening? Okay, hearing none, I will just say in closing, I want to thank everyone for participating tonight, and to Kent and the crew at Foster Group for all that they do and their expertise. Again, we'll have some future programs coming up. Information regarding those are always available on the SDSMA website. And then closing, and Kent, I'll give you an opportunity to say a few words too, but I just, again, want to say that Kent and his crew have been very good to work with. If you do have any questions, please feel free to utilize them as a resource, or you can contact the association and we will put you in touch with them. And Kent, other parting thoughts?
Just appreciate the chance to talk about the topic, and really would be happy to answer questions if you're interested in different kinds of resources. Specifically, if you're looking for recommendations on where places to go to read things, just shoot me an email and we can provide a list of things that we find helpful.
Well, again, Kent, thank you, and thank you for everyone for joining us, and have a good evening.